Today's guest is a badass of mammoth proportions, a former Royal Marine Commando and Special Forces soldier, Jason Fox. Hello and welcome to Making Gains in association with the University of Derby and Finnebrogue's Naked Bacon, the biggest revolution to happen to British breakfast in a generation. Now, our guest on today's episode, I cannot tell you how delighted I was when I found out he is officially going to be coming onto the show. This is the man who was a part of a team, the first ever team to row unassisted from mainland Europe to South America. The same team that rowed from the UK to America unassisted, crossing the Atlantic Ocean in so doing. He has spent 20 years in the military, 10 years as a Marine, 10 years in the SBS, no less. You might recognize him as a star of SAS, the show on Channel 4, as well as a two-time author. Jason Fox, welcome to Making Gains, sir. Big applause for you, mate. You're a popular guy.
Hey, mate, thanks very much. That's an unbelievable intro. I was like, who's this bloke that's coming on? That was brilliant.
Mate, I said SBS, so Special Boat Service.
Yeah. There's
a lot of confusion when it comes to Special Forces between SAS and SBS. What actually are the differences?
Now there is virtually no difference. They're structured the same. You do the same course as you're all on the same selection course together, and then at the end you just go to different geographical places. You work together a lot. There's a lot of cross-pollination with regard to who you work with. It's just the names are legacy names from the Second World War, so there isn't actually a lot of difference, and they're all commanded from the same headquarters within London.
Thank you. So there is that a bit of a myth between, basically the big question is who's the hardest, the SBS or the SAS? And a lot of people in the know will go, the SBS boys are the hardest. So that kind of, is it true?
Obviously, no. I mean, there is still, because of the geography of the two units and the name, and all that differs is one letter. There is always a little bit of healthy rivalry, but you're from the same place, really, and it's like a brother and sister. It's like two brothers. Sorry, you're always going to have a little bit of bickering every now and again.
Yeah, right, exactly. In terms of training specifically for the SF, what was that process like? So you're a commando, and then how long do you have to spend to essentially either get the nod or not?
So you go through your career and you so for me, I joined the Marines, and within the Marines as well, there's different specializations. You can go and become a mountain leader. You can do something in heavy weapons. You can be a chef. You could be a driver. There's lots of different things. And as I went through mine, I was very much interested in the soldiering side of life, and was interested, I was big into mid-fitness and what have you. And so after a period of time, I was like, well, I might as well put in for it. So what you do is you request to go on the selection course. And I suppose the powers that be can say, oh, no, you're not ready for it. Or, you haven't been a good boy, so we're not going to let you go on it. But ultimately, it's up to you when you want to try and go for it.
So you were a Marine for 10 years at the point that you went across. So you started at 16. So were you around mid-20s when you actually went to the SBS?
Yeah, it's probably just shy of 10 years. It was like 9. So I think I was about 25. And just sort of, I was at that point where I was like, I'm enjoying being a soldier, but I want to up it a little bit. And so, there's always been this pull towards that world for me. I knew a few people that had done it, and so that's what it was. I was like, let's give it a go.
Because you mentioned that you were fit. Was that fit as in gym strong? Was that running? Was it, what type of fitness was it that you were good at?
I think at that stage of the game, it was all about endurance. distance running, carrying a heavy pack. I'd say I was more robust than super fit, and that's where you want to be when you go on that course. You want to be a robust individual that can take a few knocks, but keep on, going, running, not so much running, but occasionally running with a heavy pack on over horrendous terrain.
Is that what you guys call yomping?
Yomping. Marines call it yomping. The Army call it tabbing. Same thing.
Okay. And how much are you carrying when you do that?
It can vary, but on the selection course, you start off with about, I think it's 65 pounds on your back, minus food and water. And then I think it goes up to about 85, 90.
And what
so it's quite heavy. What body weight am I?
Were you at that point? Yeah, when you were carrying that 85.
I was actually I was a lot slighter than I am now. I don't know, probably, I don't know, 100. What was I? I'm trying. Thing is, I use pounds, and then now I think in metric, and it all throws it out. So I was probably about 75, 80 kilograms. I was quite a lot lighter.
Is that a sort of an average build for a guy in the SF?
Yeah, mate. It varies a lot now. I was quite slight, and everyone back then was. But I think the way people approach fitness now across the board is different, and so that in turn changes within the military as well. But I was more about the endurance side of distance, and you do cover on the selection course. You cover some unbelievable distances carrying that weight. And
it's not in Barbados that you're doing it either.
Unfortunately not, no. Although to be fair, Barbados would be a stinker because of the humidity.
Right. Yeah. It's what any SF guy that I've ever kind of had the privilege of speaking to, what always kind of gets me about them is how relatively normal they look. As in, I was filming for Blue Peter, I was doing actually skydiving with the RAF Falcons, and I worked out that one of the guys was from the SF. And I knew who it was. I knew it because I saw the biggest dude there. And then, no, it's not him. And then it took me 3 days. And I basically went up to a guy. I won't say his name. I went up to him. I said, "Excuse me." I said, "Are you in the SAS?" And he looked at me and I thought, "Oh, no, I just shouldn't have asked. I've worded it all wrong." And he said, "Who have you been speaking to?" And I said, I just was trying to work out. I knew there was somebody important here and I presumed it was you. And he told me a few bits and bobs, but what I just couldn't get over is the nuts you guys have to do that job. As in, it's not, I kind of presumed you'd be 30-man strong teams. And what you let me know is actually a lot of it might be you on your own, self-reliant. And I mean, are you born like that, or is it something that it's trained into you?
No, I don't think anyone's born like that. I think there are certain things that can happen to people along their journey of life, and some people do experience stuff at a young age. Whether they've grown up in a difficult area, or the background of the family's been difficult. That then obviously will breed a form of resilience into people. But for me, I grew up in a slightly rough area, but I actually had a decent childhood and a good background. But I think mine was actually, joining the military and being passionate about it and passionate about that career, that I created my own resilience going along that journey, I suppose. But yeah, I don't think anyone's born with it, but definitely an upbringing and where you are from can definitely lend itself to you being a slightly resilient person.
If you were to kind of connect dots between all the people you think of when you say success in the military, would there be any themes that you'd say, in order to be successful, you need to have X, Y, or Z, or a particular kind of personality? Or
Yeah, I think there is, like, we go back to sort of that physical robustness that you've got, because there's a lot of luck involved, and there's always potential for injury along the way. And if you can, you know, roll with the punches, then that's going to help you. But I think a lot of it comes down to having a flexible mindset, you know, not being too phased when things go wrong. Um, and ultimately, if I'm brutally honest, it's got to be someone that's quite stubborn as well.
Okay. 'Cause I've heard
It's
you
that
describe yourself as,
incessant. Say again.
I've heard you describe yourself as that before.
Yeah, my approach towards tasks, I would say I'm reasonably stubborn. I'm not prepared to sort of embrace not so much failure, because obviously that comes along the way, but I'm not prepared to give up when failure's presented itself. You know, I'll pick myself back up and be like, right, how do we go back at it?
Right. Because something that I really, again, took from anyone that I've even seen on TV is this kind of separation from emotion when describing things. So even in your book, Battle Scars, all the stories that you tell, my version would be bullets were flying overhead, and I was, whereas it's so fact based that you're vividly recalling the color. You talk about the green of the night vision and the smell.
Yeah.
It's very, it's visceral, but it isn't emotional. It is again, is that something that you just have
Mm.
in you?
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes from the training. So you're just constantly conditioned, although not consciously, it's subconsciously, constantly doing something over and over and over and over again, that it sort of becomes the norm. But all those things, you're expected as an individual within those units to be receptive of everything, like the colors and the smells, because they're essentially, we call, in the military we call them combat indicators, but it's basically an indication of a moment that you need to switch on. So it's like, right, my life is now green, I can smell this, I need to switch on. You know, things are in a we're in a dangerous situation. But ultimately, the emotional side, emotions don't lend themselves to positive outcomes sometimes. And so I've, the amount of times I've like thought back and sort of reflected on it, and even though you're in situations that involve what I suppose is extreme violence, you know, you're in a battle, but I never ever remember feeling, seeing, or experience anyone that is angry. It's weird. You speak to people and they're like, oh, you must have been so angry when that happened. And you're like, ah, no, everything was matter of fact, because it has to be. Because if you allow yourself to be angry, then chances are you're going to make some wrong decisions.
Which is nuts, given the
It
context.
is
So,
nuts.
yeah.
It is nuts looking back on it. I'm like, that doesn't sound quite right. But anyway, it is what it is.
You know, when it comes to the SF, I used to do a bit of skeleton bobsleigh, and if I ever did an interview, people would always say, "What inspires you to dive headfirst down a tea tray and all the rest of it?" And I think, well, it's not on a tea tray. You're not diving anywhere. It's lazy questions. And I think if you only ask the right question, there's so much about this sport that actually you'd find interesting. What don't we know
Yeah.
about the SF that you think we actually should know?
The first of all, and I have always said this actually, so some people might know, but it is just ordinary people. Like, we're all ordinary. The world is full of ordinary people. Just some of them do extraordinary things, like the skeleton. So, as an outsider, I genuinely think the skeleton is bonkers. Because I mean, it's something I'd love to have a go at, but it is bonkers. But I think the first thing is, yeah, it's just a group of ordinary people that are willing to do extraordinary things. And then I don't know, because it's weird. I sit down with my mates that have left or still in, and I'm like, mate, do you remember when we did X, Y, or Z? And like, when you look at it from a detached, you know, point of view, you're like, how the hell, how did we do that sort of stuff? And I think it does come down to like the stubbornness and the want to keep achieving something. But what everyone does think that people in the special forces have got no sense of humor, and it couldn't be further from the truth. I have never had so much fun within what some people would see as quite a serious environment or career. It was it was it was almost relentless. the, the abuse and banter.
Mate, the banter in the military is off the charts. That was, again, the lads, stuff I've done with them off camera. I think, wow, wow, how are you
Yeah.
made this with this kind of stuff? It is brutal.
It is, and I'm not gonna advocate it, but I think sometimes that ability to not take yourself seriously,
Yeah,
even if it is at quite an extreme level, is very important when you're doing something that's quite extreme.
right.
You've always got to have a sense of humor, whether it's slightly twisted or not, because ultimately you're still in a good mindset. You've still got a positive. If you're having fun to a weird degree, you've still got a positive mindset. It's when someone isn't cracking jokes or having a little bit of a dig that you've got to think to yourself, right, hang on, what's going on here? There's obviously something's gone really bad for it to be that, for us to be in such a dark pit.
I know obviously you're into your fitness before, you still into your fitness now. If I finish a gym session and it's gone well, I feel pretty flipping good. How do you actually
Yeah.
feel when a mission has gone well? What's going through your head?
It's a euphoric feeling. It's very addictive as well, but it is also, the other side of it is because the byproduct of doing those sort of things can be negative as well, because ultimately you've gone in and you're engaging with the enemy. So belonging is far greater. So when you've succeeded in mission and you've done stuff with the guys that you essentially love, it's that sense of belonging and the identity, and there's kudos behind it as well within the organization. So yeah, it's great. You can't do it forever. I mean, at the time I wished I could, but ultimately as you get older you're like, thank God I'm not doing that anymore.
It's Do you feel like King Alphas when you're doing it? As in being walking around just in life, knowing what you're doing is so off the charts. And even just the idea of whether it's hostages that you're going to be rescuing, just the idea that it doesn't matter which geezers are inside that building, we are the guys with the biggest nuts. Is that a great feeling?
There is that. It's important to keep it in check though, because
Okay.
you can trip up. I mean, I've actually been on a hostage rescue mission that was one of the most craziest things I've ever been involved in, and the emotional roller coaster on that, from fear to being like that alpha, sort of like cutting around, knowing that you're feeling like you're the toughest thing on the planet. It comes and goes in waves, and sometimes you have to check it. But yeah, it is. You finish those things. On that one mission, we rescued a journalist, and you come back and you're like, that's awesome. We've just saved someone's life. That's pretty. And we were getting hammered as well. That we were outnumbered big time, but we still got out of there with this guy intact. So yeah, there is a lot of that, but it's very important to keep it in check, because if that runs away with itself, then you could find yourself in a sticky position.
And how long do you have to prepare for something like that when you are outflanked, you are outnumbered, but ultimately you're going to person?
I think I think my whole career was all about preparing me for those moments, that come every now and again. But I mean, that the irony is that what we went on that time, the information changed at the last minute, and we had to change our entire approach, and everything we'd spoken about beforehand changed. And so it is more about what you've learned along the way, as opposed to what you know about the now, because the now changes so quickly.
Is there a sense of like, no, in any team, you have a natural leader, whether or not they are the official leader, And if one guy is looking a little bit not too sure, it sends ripples down the rest of the team. Is there a case of you get that the information's changed? Are you looking to go, is this actually all right? Are we still going to go ahead? Or is it just presumed that this is happening regardless? The information just happens to have changed.
So on other missions that require a lot of time, thought, effort to go into planning, if things change last minute, you'll probably pull the plug on it and be like, all right, lads, let's just chill for a bit, assess the situation, recock, and then go again at a later date. Whereas this was a different kettle of fish because it was a hostage rescue. He wasn't in a great position. The information changed, but the fact was he's in a very dangerous situation and he needs someone to try and attempt to get him out of that situation. So it was a case of, that information changed. We got briefed it out to everyone else, and everyone's like, yeah, we're good to go. Let's go. We understand what the situation is. We've signed along the dotted line, and we're willing to. Not only do we live by the sword, but we're willing to die by it because of that.
A lot of the missions that, again, in your book, seem to be at night time. During the actual day, if you've got a mission, do you even think about what you eat? Is your mind all about the mission? Is every minute planned out ahead of it? What's that day like?
The day, I mean, most stuff is at night. We prefer the night. That's our friend. But the days, if you weren't doing anything, because sometimes we did go out in the day, the missions would dictate that, but a lot of the time the structure to the day was quite set in stone. I'd get up in the morning, wake up a few, the lads that I trained with would get up. We used to have fresh coffee. It's brilliant with a coffee grinder, beans in, awesome fresh coffee, straight bean to cup. And then we'd basically go, we had our own little gym. We'd go there, we'd do we trained like unbelievably when we were away. It was like a 6-month health farm. Meals were always prepped really well, decent food. Probably if we could and we wanted to, if we didn't think we were working in the evening, we'd bang out a second training session. Because you're in that zone and you feel strong, you feel fit, you're in a really clean headspace. And then if we were going to go out on missions, then the build up to that, even though you're doing little bits of briefs throughout the day, the build up would start around, say, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, where you're starting to get yourself into the right headspace, talking about what it is you might be doing, so on and so forth, and then you're into that sort of cycle.
Have you ever gone into a situation thinking it's more likely than not that I'm not going to come out of this?
There was that one that I spoke about earlier. Once we sort of got on the ground, there was a few times when we were on the ground where I was like, I'm not convinced that this, if we've bitten off more than we can chew here, there was some serious stuff going down. And, there was a couple of moments where I personally, and I know some of the other lads were along because we've discussed it, but it was like, bloody hell, I don't know whether I'm going to get out of it. And there's a moment where you're like, your mouth goes dry and you start wondering and thinking about the people back home. And then you sort of snap out of it and you're like, right, hang on a minute, I'm not giving up now. We've got to find a way out of this situation. And we did, thanks to other people. But there are times, yeah, definitely.
When every time you speak and you kind of recount something, I've kind of got images in my head, that kind of movie images that flash into my head. Have you ever seen a film and gone, actually, to be fair, that is pretty accurate?
Yeah, there is. So there's it's a good film actually. There's one called Zero Dark 30, which is it's all about the sort of the story behind how the Americans were trying to capture bin Laden. And at the very end of that, you've got a 45-minute, and the whole thing's brilliant, but the last 45 minutes, I think, is solely about the SEAL team that goes in and does that raid. And I remember watching it for the first time and I was like, wow. The girl that, it was a lady that directed it, Catherine Bigelow, how she captures that 45 minutes is unbelievable. Like the atmosphere, from it going from noisy to silent, there's always like an eerie silence as well within these nights that you're a part of, and how she encapsulated that is unbelievable. And it does, I watch it, and every now and again I'll watch it again because I really enjoy it, and it makes the hairs on the back of my head stand up a little bit. Even down to the way that the operators, the guys on the ground, are chatting to each other, the general chit chat as they're involved in something quite serious is quite close to the mark. Yeah, good film. Recommend it.
Thank you for that, Dan. Yeah, I'll take your recommendation. You mentioned the SEALs there. There are special forces around the world. Oh, because we're very proud to say we've got the finest special forces in the world, but we happen to be the country that is saying it. So are we actually head and shoulders above the rest?
I think yes, definitely we are. I think the Americans are very good. I can't. They've got. I mean, they've got the added luxury of money, but their guys do commit to whatever it is that they're doing. They've sacrificed a lot. We've learned a lot from them as they've learned from us. So I would say we're on a par
Okay.
with the Americans. But again, the Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, they've all got good individuals within them.
In terms of, I have to talk to you about your PTSD because you've spoken so openly and honestly about that. It really is incredible. If I could ask you the same thing that I asked you before, what do we not know about particularly your journey of PTSD? Because you've spoken a lot about it, and obviously your answers are limited to the questions that get asked to you.
I mean, I think my PTSD, and I'm not going to talk for everyone's, but mine didn't manifest itself in like the Hollywood sense, whereas everyone expects me to. The reason I was affected was because I came back home and I was having flashbacks, and a car would backfire, and I'd dive behind some bins for cover. It wasn't like that at all. Mine was just a complete change in mood. I just felt differently about myself and a career, and I think if I'd have just embraced that earlier and decided to address it earlier, I probably would have stayed in that job. But because I didn't, and I didn't recognize it, that's why I went on this sort of downward spiral into depression, because I wasn't willing to understand why I felt differently, and it annoyed me, but I wasn't being honest, if that makes sense, with myself. And so it wasn't, it definitely wasn't because of all of the symptoms that people would expect. It was as simple but as unrecognizable as a change in mood.
Right. Thank you for that. It's funny. There was actually a guy I spoke to from the SBS. I currently have therapy, so I see a therapist about my dad. My dad passed away a few years ago, and I never really addressed it. And I was working at the Invictus Trials, the UK Invictus Trials 2019. There's a guy called Alan White, aka Commando Teddy Bear, and he's kind of on the road to recovery after being injured in the SF. And basically, I just randomly dropped something into him. I think I must have just in passing mentioned, quite flippantly, seeing a therapist, and he just paused, and whatever it was he did, he pulled a lot of information out of me that I don't normally give. And he said, "What happens if you fill up a balloon?" And I said, "It gets bigger." He went, "What happens if you keep filling it up?" I said, "It gets even bigger." He went, "What happens if you keep filling it up?" I said, "Well, eventually it will burst." He went, "Right." He went, "Some people have got a small balloon. Other people have a massive balloon. But you put enough air in it, it will burst." And when he said it, there were other people around, but I nearly just burst into tears because I felt like he just described me. I'd gotten to break and it was at that tipping point, and I had burst. And the fact he just obviously seen it in me, and a bloke like him who's been through what he's been through, just made me think, yes, I am going to own this thing, and I am going to get therapy. And I think it's awesome that guys like yourselves, proper alpha males, are speaking out about it. People talk about shining a light, or men should talk more, but I think men should speak honestly as well, and in a way that I guess you permit so many other people to be vulnerable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. But I think there's a huge strength that comes from vulnerability, especially admitting it. There's, I remember when I first started talking about it, and then I obviously used the platform of SAS Who Dares Wins as a bigger platform to talk about it. And I was absolutely, the build up to that episode going out was I was not a great person to be around. I was really worried about it, anxious, what are people going to think? And then the minute it did come out, like the empowerment I got from that, because I didn't have to worry about this facade that I kept putting up, because there it was, the dirty washing was for all to be seen. And if you don't like it, there's not a lot I can do about it, because that's just who I am. And I can't implore people enough to do that and be honest with yourself and go and start a journey. If you're feeling not quite right, go and start the journey of looking for the right person to talk to. But it is essentially about releasing a pressure valve. Do you know what I mean? And it's nothing to be embarrassed about, and it doesn't detract away from you being a man. If it's men that are listening, it doesn't detract away from women being women. It is just something that needs to be done, and you can do it in a way that still fits in with your your sort of tough guy ego, if that's what you want. Because I've got friends who are some of the hardest people I've ever met in my life, and yet we still touch base with each other, check in. Hey mate, how's it going? Yeah, not bad. Sometimes there might be a few issues. We'll discuss it, work out a decent way to attack it, and everyone's feeling a lot better. So I think it's talking about something and allowing yourself to be vulnerable is powerful.
Mate, thank you for saying that. What you just said was powerful. But let's ask, when you say hardest people what does that look and sound like when you say somebody is hard?
I mean, like you said, and you've experienced, they come in all shapes and sizes, but there's just a presence about some people. I've got some really good friends who are, what they've achieved and what they've done is on another level. And I would suggest, when I say that, I mean, what's in their head is resilient. They are like, nothing phases them, and they'll take on the world and probably come out, not far off the top. So I suppose there's a few people I know that I genuinely am glad that I've had around me when I've been in some sticky situations.
Right. Okay. You mentioned Who Dares Wins there when you were talking about PTSD, and you say in your book it's a new brotherhood for you. Is that how it feels on the show?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, we have a laugh. We have a laugh. The contestants don't.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
No, they do actually, but it is a brotherhood. It is it is very welcome. We finished our careers, being involved in lots of different things, and then this opportunity came about. And I remember when the first series finished, we were walking down the main little road of the location we're in. We literally just finished, and I was like, I had to Ollie, and I was like, walking beside me, I just said, mate, this is that thing that was missing. Like, we're together, we're having a good crack. I said I could do this over and over again for the rest of eternity. But yeah, it's a great feeling. We have a great laugh, and it is a good little bit of camaraderie. There's a nice sense of belonging there.
But I have to say, for me, what perfectly sums up the transition, or basically the comparison between a TV personality, and someone who's been there and done it, was what you did with Captain Kidd's Lost Treasure. That
Oh yeah,
was hilarious. Because in that documentary,
yeah,
you've basically got experts who seem to find basically nothing, and then you on your own go and actually find the actual lost treasure.
it was me, and it was actually the series producer who also doubled up as the underwater cameraman, Sam Brown, who is a loose cannon in a good way. We decided we'd go and have a look for ourselves because we were bored. We'd spent 4 weeks in an amazing place with amazing people, but we did have a little bit of a rummage around, and we found a lump of metal.
And that metal was the metal. Everyone else seemed to find sort of teapots, and you actually found.
Yeah, it was a 55 kilogram silver ingot. There's been dispute about it, but
Okay.
I was there. It's a silver ingot.
Hey, can I ask, do you reckon you'll do any more docs? Because some of the stuff you were doing about the narcos, mate, they were just so good.
I hope so. I there's a few things in the pipeline, not guaranteed, but I really, I love SAS Who Dares Wins, and I love the dynamic that it is. But those documentaries, I really love doing them. It's an amazing experience to go to places that you wouldn't normally be able to go to and learn about other people, and the trials and tribulations that they have to face on a daily basis. It was enlightening, scary at times, but it was an amazing experience. Yeah, and I hope that hopefully there'll be more to come, but who knows?
And when you say
Fingers crossed.
scary, yeah, fingers crossed, mate. And when you say scary, is that partly because you don't have that team around you that you're possibly used to, and it's not then just you on your own in an environment surrounded by TV people like me who aren't made for that environment?
You say that, but TV people and special forces aren't that far different fundamentally. But your approach to things, our approach to things. But yeah, there was an element of it being the fact that I didn't have backup, so to speak. There was a lot of systems and procedures in place to mitigate against, but I think a lot of it also is those people are dangerous, and they are very, very unpredictable, and you have to keep a very level, calm head about you and not rise to. Ego's got to be left at the door in those situations. You cannot go in thinking you're all that, because they will do something that you don't like. So it was an amazing. I learned a lot, but I did have to call upon, being in special forces as well. A lot of people think that you go in guns blazing. You don't. Normally you're in small teams, like you said earlier, and it's all about relationship management, dealing with unpredictable people. You don't necessarily want to get into a fight. You just want things to go the way you want them to go. And actually, if you don't need to throw a punch or shoot a gun, that's a better way of it going. So that's what I adopted more of. And it was very frightening, but it was also exhilarating. And it was unbelievable to meet those people.
Yeah, it was unbelievable to see it. And just going back to the SF finally, what was your euphoria moment back then? You talk about in your book kind of taking off your pack at the end of it and feeling your back just stretch and relax. But what do you kind of live for in that moment?
Um, I would say probably the feeling of brotherhood, the unconditional love and trust that you've got for one another, whether you like them or not. That feeling of knowing that you can trust your life with people that are around you, and vice versa, hopefully, it's an unbelievable feeling.
Yeah, well, I think that's the perfect place to end on Brotherhood. Jason, thank you so much for your time. Also, thank you for your service, mate, because I think what you guys do, we only know a tiny slither of a fraction. And I would basically like to have the balls to be able to do what you've done. So thank you very much, mate.
Mate, thanks very much. Likewise, chucking yourself down a skeleton requires quite a bit of balls, so good effort.
Cheers, mate. All the best.
Naked bacon. One day, all bacon will be made this way.